If you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. That's a saying, a quote from a popular mentor of mine. If you fight for your limitations, guess what? You get to keep them. Now, as a people, we would have gone through a lot of fight when we consider slavery as a part of our rich heritage and legacy. And we would have used it as an excuse pad, an excuse blanket to somehow keep us from attaining as a people, not the sporadic one, two, or three, but as a people, and really showing up full and all out, taking our places within this earth. This afternoon, I have the privilege and the honor to sit and to have a talk with one of my past colleagues and friend in the person of Mr. Cameron Gill, doctor, if you please. I want to share with you just a bit about Cameron before we bring him up. Cameron was born in Irish Town, Bastia. Let me get our help up in here. St. Kitts. Dr. Cameron Gill is a graduate of the Bastia High School. He holds a bachelor with honors in history with a minor in archaeology in 2003 and a MA with distinction in heritage studies 2009, both from the University of the West Indies, that's UWI Cave Hill campus in Barbados. For his master's dissertation, he researched Barbados maritime heritage from a material culture perspective. From 2010 to 2016, he was the CEO of the Brimstone Hill Fortress National Park Society and the UNESCO focal point for St. Kitts and Nevis. He is a senior lecturer in the Faculty of Arts, Science, and General Studies at the Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College and the principal archaeologist, heritage, and historical research consultant at CamGill Consulting. CamGill Consulting has successfully completed projects for the Ministry of Agriculture and Taiwanese Embassy, the Department of Environment, and the Nevis World Heritage Committee. Cameron is a member of the Association of Caribbean Historians, ACH, the International Council of Monuments and Sites, ICOMOS, the Institute of Historical Studies, IHS, at the University of London, the Royal Netherlands Institute of Southeast Asian and Caribbean Studies, KIT LV, and an advisory board member on the Caribbean Heritage Network, CHN. In 2020, he successfully defended his archaeology PDS dissertation, Leiden University, Netherlands, on the historical archaeology of the port of Sandy Point and its anchorage. Welcome with me, Dr. Cameron Gill.
Good day, Michelle. Thanks for having me.
Welcome. And my affectionate name for Gill, from I've met him and we worked together for too short of a period of time, is Gill. Well, it's my honor to have you here. And as I told you just before we went live, when I thought of celebrating Black History Month, you're one of the first persons that came to mind. And I'm just so honored to have you here. Congratulations on your doctorate. Congratulations on all that you have accomplished to this point in your life. I see just greatness ahead for you, and I listen with expectant ears to hear what other giant you have slain and what other feat you have accomplished. But I'm really just so honored and so
Well,
happy to know
th-
you.
thanks, Michelle, and I'm honored that you've invited me. And I'm looking at greatness as well. My former colleague, now a journalist and podcaster, doing great things as well. So trust me, I'm honored.
Yep, yep, wonderful, wonderful. So we want to go ahead and jump right in. You want to share anything just before we start or digging into our
No, I think you did an eloquent job of covering all the bases just now. So
yes? Okay. All right, wonderful. Sounds good. All right. So today we want to go ahead and have a conversation on slavery. As a black people, we're looking at now on the fly, I would have said to folks, come
mhm.
and help us, come and celebrate with us. And I know folks would read the flyer and say, celebrate? Like, what is there to celebrate about our history of slavery? What would your response to such a person who would see the flyer and say, celebrate? What is there to celebrate? What would your response be to a question like that, Gil?
There's a lot to celebrate. You see, part of the problem, and we had a little discussion one-on-one before we went on the live just now. Part of the
Mhm.
problem is in past, and that is being addressed now. But part of the problem is in the past how history was taught in our schools, especially the history of slavery. So we were taught that that we were enslaved, and that we got our freedom thanks to humanitarians that willed and Wilberforce, etc., etc. Okay, which
Mhm.
is just part and um while we're addressing that in our syllabi in the region, in many other parts of the UK, and this was highlighted in the Black Lives Matter protest a couple of years ago. The curriculums in schools in the UK still teach the history of the Caribbean, the history of the slavery in this manner. Okay, so the role that we played, for example, in resistance. Okay, the role that we played in resistance. So that is why when CXC was created to replace the GCE, the English-based General Certificate of Education that was administered by Cambridge University. So when the
Yes.
Caribbean Examinations Council was founded to replace that, you find in the CSEC history syllabus, and no syllabus is and will ever be perfect, but the CSEC history syllabus places emphasis along the, as well as the CAPE history syllabus, which is taught at colleges, place emphasis on as well, including the experience of our role in resistance, because we played a major role in bringing about our own liberation. Okay, um, when the British government by a legal decree ended slavery in 1834, and they did so before any of the other slave owning powers. Okay, they did so before the Netherlands and France, long before Spain and Portugal, and before the United States. But they did it because they were forced to do so. Okay, they did it because they were forced to do. And Eric Williams, in his groundbreaking thesis, Capitalism and Slavery, he made the point that the British were forced economically; it was becoming less viable. You had the security issue. Okay, Africans have been resisting and from the time the first Spanish and Portuguese ships started bringing captive Africans to the Western Hemisphere in the early 16th century, so in the early 1500s. Africans have been resisting the enslavement from the beginning. Okay, you have Africans like Queen Nzinga on the African continent who fought against the slave traders. In the Middle Passage, there was constant revolts. People know about the Amistad, and the Amistad is a famous example there, but the Amistad is not an outlier. There was several incidents of revolts on slave ships. As a matter of fact, this maybe interests you as a woman, Michelle.
Mhm. Mhm.
But historical evidence shows that ships with a high number of female captives on them were the ones that were most likely to have revolts. Okay? And there are several, well, it's not certain why this is, several theories there are for this. One being that the crews might have have their guard down more around females. Also, the lustfulness and the depravity of the slave ship crews sometimes worked against them. It is documented that very often on the slave ships, the crews or the ship would bring the women up on deck to amuse themselves with them, including sexually.
Mm-hmm.
So the female captives often use this as a way to, gather
Report.
intelligence level to the ship where the weapons were placed, though, and then when they got back down the hold, they share this information with the other captives and could plan revolts. So you have constant revolts on slave ships, so much so that many insurance companies refuse to insure slave ships. You would have probably heard of a firm named Lloyd's. Lloyd's is today the world's largest maritime insurer. So most of the cruise ships, cargo ships, and other vessels we see come to our ports in the Caribbean, whether it's in St. Kitts, Jamaica, or other ports, most of these ships are insured by Lloyd's. Lloyd's rose to prominence because, as many businesses, even today do, they see a niche, which for whatever reason is either overlooked or maybe other businesses are afraid to venture into.
Yes.
Many insurance companies were unwilling to insure slave ships because of the risk involved. And so Lloyd stepped into the breach and they basically monopolized the market. And that is what made them a multi-billion-dollar firm today. Okay. So you have resistance in Africa because, yes, we know that there were Africans who did engage in selling their own people. But I'll come back to that in a bit. But you don't hear much spoken about those who resisted, like Queen and Zinga. You have resistance at the Middle Passage to the point where it was extremely difficult to get a slave ship insured. And then in the Americas itself, from the very beginning of the slave trade, Africans were resisting right up until the slavery ended. But then what happened? Coming close to the 19th century, the revolts became more frequent, more violent. Okay, whereas before you might have a revolt encompassing a plantation, now you had revolts encompassing entire islands. Okay, so you had, for example, the Bossa Rebellion in Barbados. You had the Sam Sharp Arsenal, the Christmas Rebellion in Jamaica. You had the Demerara Rebellion in Guyana, and other rebellions throughout practically almost every other Caribbean island. Then also the Haitian Revolution, which in which the Africans and Haiti freed themselves. And so France lost their most valuable sugar colony. This greatly alarmed the British. The British had a great fear of this happening to them as well. Okay? And the British came to the realization that they had two choices. Either freedom from above, in other words, we grant them freedom on our own terms, or freedom from below. The enslaved free themselves on their own terms. And so the British realized that, so we were the ones who brought about, at some point, slavery would have had to end, but our own actions forced the British to end it before they had to. The struggle did not end there, because then they had a struggle coming to the 20th century for fair treatment, human rights, working for fair wages. That led to a series of revolts in the 1930s, around about a century after slavery ended. The Buckley's revolt in St. Kitts, other revolts, they had revolts in Jamaica around the same time, dock workers and plantation workers, etc. So we have been resisting during and even after enslavement ended. That is something to celebrate, okay? An analogy I like to use, Jews do not use the Holocaust as a source of shame. They commemorate it and even celebrate it because that gave them strength, okay? That gave them strength, okay? So much to the point that some Zionists actually, I would say, desecrate the memory of the Holocaust survivors, and some Zionists use that to excuse some of the actions of the Israeli state today. I'm not making a controversial statement, but it needs to be said, okay? But there are many Jews who do not do that, and so there are many Jews alive who actually disagree with the policies of the Israeli government, okay? And many of these Jews work hard to honestly honor the memory of the Holocaust. So they don't see it as a source of shame. They see it as a source of strength that we were able to come through this and overcome. We need to look at our enslavement the same way, okay? I promise I'm going to come back to something. One argument that is used, and not just by us, very often you see those who want to maintain the status quo in countries, the USA, etc., use this argument that there were Africans who sold others into slavery. And we have internalized that argument and argue that, and that has given many of us the attitude that there's nothing to celebrate or commemorate, okay? Let me point out this, okay? The perception of Africans selling their fellow Africans into slavery, there's a major flaw in that argument. And let me explain. Today, we identify ourselves based on what a nationality or nation state, okay? Jamaican, Kittitian, Nevisian, Trinidadian, Canadian, Nigerian, Ghanaian, South African, Kenyan, Chinese, Pakistani, whatever. But what we need to realize is that the nation state as we perceive it is a fairly, historically speaking, a recent concept, and is one that was imposed on us by Europeans, okay? When Europeans first came to Africa, there was no Nigeria or Ghana or South Africa, etc. Okay, you have various ethnic groups. They use the word tribes. Is a word I tend to avoid because of the fact that the colonizers put a racial connotation to the word tribes. Okay, not wrong with the word, just I tend to avoid it. So they would have met various ethnic groups. Okay, so nationality, what we have now, did not exist. Now, someone living an Ashanti, okay, would have seen himself as Ashanti. There was no sense of Pan-Africanism when you, just like, for example, in Europe, okay, you had various tribes in Europe. You had the Vikings, you had the Gauls in what is today France, you had the Celtic tribes. There was no sense of a pan-European identity, okay? This came about later through many civil wars and the consolidation of kingdoms in Europe, and that is how the modern day nation states, as we know them, France, Germany, etc. The United Kingdom got its name. Why is it called the United Kingdom? Because you had, for centuries in ancient times, various kingdoms fighting with each other until eventually the more powerful ones were able to consolidate power, and that is how you end up having one monarch and one country called the United Kingdom. Okay, so the nation state did not exist then. So there was no sense of I'm capturing a fellow black man or a fellow African and sending them to slavery. Okay, you had wars, you had prisoners of war being taken captive, and these were sold to other Africans, to Arabs, or to Europeans, etc. Later on, as the demands driven by greed, and especially as the sugar industry began to go in the Americas, as the demands for captive Africans grew, and as some African kings began to realize the devastating effect it was having on this, including the population, loss of skills, the way to destabilizing their societies, some started to push back against this. But it was too late by then, okay? But it's important to understand that it's not a matter that, oh, blacks were selling fellow blacks. Pan-Africanism as a concept in which you identify yourself as black, whether you're in Trinidad or Amsterdam or London, that was a concept that came out in the early 20th century, okay? First popularized by people like Marcus Garvey, and then you had other Pan-Africanists came after him, and then in the French Caribbean, and the people like Aimé Césaire, who popularized similar, there's a word, negritude. That's also negritude, which is kind of similar to the concept of Pan-Africanism, that we all share similar culture, similar struggles, experiences, etc. So it is bearing in mind that it was not a matter of, oh, Africans selling out their own fellow Africans, which is why many of us tend to look at slavery in that manner today. So that concept did not exist back then. It is an excuse used by our people to avoid taking ownership of our history, and it is an excuse that I've found that sometimes I see on many historical videos on YouTube. You find commentators would say, so why should there be reparations? Africans captured other Africans, okay? Let me use some examples. During the Second World War, when Germany invaded much of Europe, so for example, in countries like the Netherlands and Norway, etc., you would have had resistance, and France. You would have had resistance movements that would have been formed in these countries to resist the Nazi invasion. But you also had nationals in these countries who collaborated with the Germans as well, okay? You will never hear a Dutchman today say that we should not commemorate the history of the Second World War because they were Dutch who collaborated with the Germans. You will never hear a Norwegian or a Frenchman say that. But yet you would hear us say, why should we commemorate history, etc.? Why should I give reparations when some of our own people. Okay, so human nature, a lot of students, right? History is not just about studying dates and times and memorizing dates. You're dealing with human beings like us, okay? And human nature is people make decisions, okay? It may be based on personal selfish interest. It may be based out of fear. So when the Germans invaded, say, the Netherlands, a civil servant working in a Dutch ministry, he or she have a family to support, okay? So they may collaborate simply as a matter of survival because they have a family to support, okay? Okay? That does not make them necessarily any less a man or woman than the person who joined the resistance movement. Each person made an individual choice based on their particular situation, etc. Okay? So similarly, when the English invaded Scotland, and that is again why it's called UK today, battles between various kingdoms over centuries. When the English invaded Scotland, there were several clans. The term that they use for tribes in Scotland is clans. Okay, a clan is basically a tribe based along family lines. There were some clans that would have fought against the English invaders, and some clans that would have fought on their side. Okay, so later on, when the British Army was formed, you actually had found that you actually had Scottish regiments that were descended from clans that would have fought with the British. And up to today, while these regiments have been consolidated, etc., some don't exist anymore, you find in the cap badges and their traditions, they still perpetuate these regiments. Okay. You will never hear a Scotsman say we should never celebrate certain aspects of history because there was Scots who collaborated with the English. Okay. Ireland, you had some Irish who supported the English, some who were against. So you find that wherever you go, in mainland Europe during the Nazi occupation and the British Isles, and in Africa. Okay. Another example.
We hold it just a moment.
Repeat that. Go ahead. Sorry.
This is just answering one question.
Yes. Yes.
Guys, you see how adept his knowledge is? The as Gil would have shared, and even as you touched on the last part when you said the fellow who would have had his family that he had to attend to and he had to provide for, right away I saw that was a business move. Like,
yes,
I need to make this business move in order to provide for my family. But this is one of these are many reasons that
yes.
Dr. would have shared just now why our history is something to be celebrated.
Yes. No, we're not saying that they were not traitors. You would have had a traitor in Holland who would have maybe ratted out to the Nazis that this neighbor is Jewish to seek personal gain out of it. Okay, that you can't excuse. Okay, and you would have had individuals like certain African kings and chieftains who put personal interest and prestige, above all, and were willing to sell people, some that were into slavery. So yes, you find opportunities everywhere. Okay, but what I'm saying is not. And we have internalized this belief that this is something unique to us as a Black people. But if you study human history, anywhere you go, you find people who will side with the occupying for various reasons and those who resist, whether it's in Asia, whether it's in Mesoamerica, Africa, Europe, wherever.
And with that, we're going to take a quick pause as we share with you a promotion that's coming up. Thank you. Now, Gil, I have a question for you.
Sure.
And this is a myth that is out there. the question that the myth that history class taught us everything that we needed to know about history.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true or is it
No,
true?
no, it could never be true because history is being made every day. Okay, today's headlines are tomorrow's history. Okay, you have a tragic war unfolding right now in Ukraine. Okay, now let me give an example. One of the courses I teach at the college at the Clarence Fitzgerald College is Cape History. The two units, Unit 1 and Unit 2. On the Unit 2 Cape History part, under the theme um totalitarianism and global conflict. The topics we cover under that theme are the Russian Revolution, the First World War, and the Second World War. Now, I don't have a crystal ball. I may be wrong, but I suspect that in some years from now, maybe a generation from now or before, there may be a major, the syllabus is being revised all the time. It's supposed to be revised by next year or a year after. But there may be a major revision in the next 20 to 50 years to include the current conflict in Europe on the syllabus. Because just as the Russian Revolution, the First World War and the Second World War shaped not only European history but world history up until the present day. Because the conflict right now in Ukraine is a legacy of the Russian Revolution and the Second World War, as well as the Cold War. Similarly, what is happening right now in Europe is going to forever change world history. And so it is quite possible that in some decades from now, that will be included on the Cape syllabus unit 2. So history is being made every day. Another example, we had an election in St. Kitts late last year. The new Prime Minister, Honorable Dr. Terence Joe, has indicated, and I was very happy to hear this because I've been always arguing for this for years now, that we're going to move towards becoming a republic and replace the Queen as our head of state. Barbados made that step, I think it was 2 years ago. The Prime Minister of Jamaica, the Honorable Andrew Holness, has also indicated that Jamaica will move towards becoming a republic. Now, that is history being made there, okay? Another step being taken in the colonization. Now, even though it has not happened as yet, the mere fact that you have two prime ministers in the Caribbean now seriously discussing this, that itself is history being made. Because a few years ago, while there were some people calling for this, a few years ago, there were very few regional leaders who would have thought seriously about becoming a republic, okay? Trinidad was a republic from since shortly after independence, Dominica and the Bahamas as well, and Guyana, but those were, they were it, okay? No other Caribbean countries seriously considered it for years now. So that is history being made, okay? Those are just some examples. And even what we have already know established history, even what the students are learning in school, whether primary, secondary, or college, there are so many interpretations of those events, okay? For example, last week in one of the history tutorials, one of the topics we were looking at was with respect to the Second World War, was Germany mostly at fault, or should the blame be shared between Germany and some of the other players in Europe, Britain, France, etc.? And that's a topic that historians are still discussing. While most agree that Germany started the Second World War, and it's still left to interpretation as to how much of the blame should be placed on Germany. Did the actions of other countries play into leading up to the Second World War as well? So you can never learn, and that's what I love about history. You can never learn everything. Yes, certain things are established fact. That's why, for example, your birthday is a particular date. That's established, okay? We know Mother's Day is the second Sunday in May. That's established, okay? We know Christopher Columbus made his first voyage in 1492. St. Kitts was founded around 1624 by the English colonizers. That is a fact. But then is the interpretation behind these events there will always be fodder for discussion. So you will have many more dissertations and theses being written on these. So school history class, where they're speaking about high school or college, will never teach everything about history. It provides a foundation for to have a better understanding of yourself and your society, how we got to where we are today, why our society is the way it is today. So, for example, it provides a grounding so students can understand why, for example, in most Caribbean countries, the population is majority Black or of African descent, in comparison to, say, North America, etc. So I've grown to understand these things, and you understanding, you can look forward to see where we're going, where we should be hoping to go based on, you know, what we know about our past. So it provides a foundation, but you can never learn everything from it. And for students, what they should really do, it provides a foundation for you to try to learn more about yourself and about your people and your society.
Wonderful. And like the door has been opened to the world of history.
Yes, yes.
Never person saw. Question: from your depth of study, 3 things that you could say that we can walk away as benefits, as pluses, as we just right where we're at today, just stop and put some thought to our history. 3 things that you say could work for us as we're looking at maneuvering and strategizing on where do we go from here.
Okay, 3 things. Good question. I have to put some thought into that. 3 things. One, look at all we have achieved. Okay, as I said earlier, we freed ourselves from enslavement. Okay, contrary to what was taught years ago in the text, we freed ourselves. Okay, we gave the colonizer no choice but to give us our freedom. We can take encouragement from that and say, listen, we overcame this. If you look at the rich culture that we have created in the Caribbean, and it's a culture that's been aped and copied all around the world. Okay. Now we think about it. Now, in everyday language, we use the term recently to mean days or weeks. Like, oh, I saw John Reese in town recently. That's last week. But in a historical context, right? Because the planet we live on is billions of years old. So historians, we tend to use the term recently referring to the last several hundred years, okay? Now, consider the fact that our societies in the Caribbean are recent societies, okay? And very recent free societies. Slavery in the British Empire ended in the 1830s. In the French Caribbean in the 1840s. In the Dutch in the 1860s. In the Spanish Caribbean very recently, literally just a few years before the 20th century. So when you look, so if you look at our history in the Caribbean, right? As a people, we have only been free for, let me see, 1834, we're now in 2023. Math is not my strong point, but we've been free for barely over a century and a half, okay? So we were enslaved from the 16th, sorry, to the 19th century. And we have only been a free people from the early 19th century, so 1830s, is almost 2030s, okay, just shy of 2 centuries. So when you look at all that we have managed to achieve in that relatively short period of time, we can take encouragement that any obstacle that comes, we can overcome it. So that's one thing we could take, that we can take from that, okay?
And even on to answer this question, as you share that, what I saw was we are just getting started.
Yes, yes.
It's like a child who has like a great future ahead of him or ahead of her.
Yes. 2034.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no, to go back on this first point I was making, now 2034 will be the 2nd anniversary of the end of enslavement in the British Caribbean. And that's the British Caribbean. Remember that in other parts of the Americas, people were enslaved for decades after.
Yes.
So when you look at the fact that we have been free people for less than 2 centuries, and we were enslaved in this region for what? 17, 18, 19, for about 3 centuries. So we have achieved a lot, okay? We have achieved a lot. When you look at, for example, within the developing world is Caribbean, Latin America, Africa, Asia, Middle East. Within the developing world, in the Caribbean, we are the most, we have created the most stable economies in the developing world, and even more stable than some parts of the developed world, okay? People in the Northern Hemisphere tend to refer to us as banana republics, okay? I always like to tell people, look at what happened, look at the riot and the attempted coup at the US Capitol a couple of years ago, okay? No part of the world is perfect. We've had our problems in the region, but you've never seen anything like that, with one or two exceptions, happen in most Caribbean countries ever. Okay, we have our election campaigns, people abuse the cost, we have incidents, etc. But so we have been able to achieve some of the most stable democracies on the face of the earth, and these are some of the youngest democracies. Okay, let me give another example. With some of the Caribbean territories, the British leewards, St. Kitts, Nevis, Antigua, Barbuda, Anguilla, and the British windwards, Dominica, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Grenada, we formed a body called the OACS, Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, right? We use the EC dollar. Now, when the EC dollar was launched, that was a first, and many people expected it to fail. Why? Because this was the first time ever you had several independent sovereign countries sharing the same currency. That was never done before. And here's something a lot of people do not know. When the European Union had been founded in the early 1970s, but it was not until the 1980s that they worked towards creating a single currency to replace various currencies, the French franc, the Italian lira, the German Deutschmark, the Spanish peso, etc. So they created the euro. Okay, they made an exception for Britain to keep their pound, but most countries dropped their currencies for the euro. Many people don't know this, but the European Union actually used the EC dollar as a template to base the euro on. Many people do not know this. Okay, that the European Union actually used the EC dollar as a, because it had never been done before, and so the only existing successful example is the Eastern Caribbean dollar. So this example of what we as a people have achieved so much, and we don't know. We don't know it. And a popular misconception is that in the Caribbean we learn everything from Europe, from the Americas, etc. And we don't, and we see it as a one-way street. Okay, that we don't contribute anything to the world. But look at how many aspects of our culture are being appropriated around the world, etc. Every time I travel, and I'm sure you've seen it too. It could be some other Europe, some other part of the world. Every time I go anywhere, I see white guys doing this, giving each other a fist bump. Okay, they got that from us. You know, we call it a daps, etc. Now I see white guys, I see Asian guys doing it. Okay, but that's part of our culture that they have appropriated, etc. So when you look at geographically, right, the Caribbean is one of the smallest regions in the world. If you put all the islands together, including Jamaica and Cuba, we can fit into some US states and some European countries. But our cultural influence belies our size. We can fit, the Caribbean can fit into Brazil so many times over. But if you look at our cultural influence, music, food, ways of speak, mannerisms, like the daps, white guys call it fist bump, we call it daps, etc. So that's something that we can learn from our history. Okay, the influence we have on shaping world history, and economically as well. The reason why Britain became a superpower and remained a superpower up until the Second World War, when she was eclipsed by the United States. And the reason why Britain and France, etc., Netherlands will become global military and economic powers was through the wealth that they gained from the Caribbean and from Africa. Okay, we created wealth. We still create wealth. Everybody, including the Chinese, now are going to Africa because every major industry, whether it's the automobile industry, aviation, electronics, which include mobile phones, they need minerals and other resources from Africa. Okay, we need to look at that and say we need to create wealth for ourselves as well, rather than other people enriching themselves, getting rich off of our resources. We need to invest in ourselves, and we need to gain as much and even more wealth from those resources. Okay.
Wow. Wow. That is so powerful. Oh my gosh. That is so
I'm
powerful.
scratching my head to think of two others, right? Because that was a very good question.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
That's one. Look at what we've done for the what. Okay, actually, that was two right there. What we've overcome, and we can overcome anything. Look at what we've overcome and how far we've reached in less than 2 centuries. And the second one would be look at how we have shaped world history. And a lot of us are not aware of that. Okay, and that is what we can take away from our history: the impact we've had on the world, economically, socially, culturally, and the impact that we still have. Okay.
Even what you shared about um, the euro being our EC dollars was the template, the
For the euro.
structure, the framework. That was like, whoa.
Yes. Years ago, I
No.
actually, the Economist, which is one of the world's most respected publications, the Economist News Magazine actually ran an article on this. I remember reading it back in the 1980s about the euro being based on the EC dollar. The Economist magazine actually ran an article, a feature article on that years
Wow,
ago.
that's interesting. Okay, so with that, folks, we're going to take another quick break as we and allow you just to digest the wealth of knowledge that Dr. Gill would have shared just now as we share this promo with you. It's concerning yours truly, most recent publication. Yep, that is your I am loved and affirmed gratitude journey.
Congratulations on
Thank you,
your book.
Gil.
Congratulations.
Yes,
Congratulations.
indeed. Yes,
Big
indeed.
move.
Thank
Big
you very
move.
much. Yep, yep.
Yes.
Awesome, awesome. So I would like to know, where we are now. Where do you see us as a people now? And you kind of started touching on it. Where do you see us as a people now? And where do you see like what's ahead for us in terms of what does the future hold based on your chair, based on your desk from which you operate, with all the studies and all the communications, all the boards, all the different rooms that you sit in, all the tables that you sit at? Where are we as a people now? And what do you see is ahead
Okay.
for us?
Where we are now as a people, there are a lot of opportunities ahead of us, but a lot of challenges as well. Okay. But we need to work together to overcome a lot of these challenges. These challenges remain with us, and we've seen in the media the incidents racism, including by state entities. We had the recent incident in the murder of Tyree Nichols by several police officers. And this is a continuing, and this has been going on forever. Okay, this has been going on ever since the first police forces were founded in the 19th century. And like people don't realize this, the origins of law enforcement in the United States began in the slave catching patrols, and those are the first police forces. And so when slavery ended, that legacy remains. Okay, so it's because of the advent of social media why we're bombarded. It has been happening ever since, but we're now being exposed to it more because of social media. So there are challenges and threats we face, but there are opportunities. But we need to work together as a people. Okay. Now, as I said earlier, people being opportunistic and putting their own prerogative against the benefit of their people is not unique to us as a people. Okay. However, what we need to realize is that we face unique challenges, and we need to work harder to overcome that impulse. Okay. We face other groups have been marginalized and exploited. The Chinese, the Irish, the indigenous people in the Americas, etc. Other groups have been marginalized. But I will say from it, and some people will challenge this, but I can stand up for. I'm going to say we have had it the worst. Okay, we look at the enslavement of Africans. We had it the worst, and that entrenched anti-black racism in the Americas still affects us a lot. So we need to work harder to overcome that impulse to put selfish prerogatives first. And yes, there are times when self-interest is important. Again, let's not be naive, but we need to work together to achieve a common good. That's where we are now. There are great opportunities ahead of us, but we need to work together to grasp those opportunities.
Powerful. Now,
no, sorry, you want to speak about where I think we might head us in the future?
yes.
Okay. Let me tell you though, as historians, we tend to avoid making predictions about the future, okay? So historians tend to avoid doing that. So the most we will do is speak about possibilities or probabilities, okay? Probabilities in terms of where we may head. As you are aware, Michelle, reparations has been a hot topic, and thankfully more Caribbean people opinions are changing in favor of reparations, okay? Now, the reality is that reparations from the state, while I am very pro reparations, and it's not an impossibility, but it is going to be a very tough uphill battle to get reparations. The Netherlands government, the Prime Minister of Netherlands late last year issued an apology for slavery. The same Prime Minister, Jan Rutte, of the Netherlands, a few years ago had said that there would never be an apology. He issued an apology which many people find unsatisfactory because it was done on their terms and there was no consultation with the population of St. Martin or the Dutch islands, etc. Is that they gave an apology and on worded it how they want without consulting with the people who, you know, the descendants of the enslaved, etc. But at least it was an apology, although I still feel it was unsatisfactory. Reparations is another matter. And that is going to be an uphill battle. Okay. So looking toward the future, we need to keep working towards that goal of reparations. There will be some progress in that area, I feel, but getting reparations from the state will be difficult. What we've seen happen recently is that several private or semi-private institutions have made steps towards reparations. For example, the University of Glasgow in Scotland, they signed an agreement with the University of West Indies a couple of years ago that they will pay X amount of millions towards UWI for capacity building as a form of reparations, etc. Okay. So, and there was another entity, I read an article a couple of months ago making a similar step. I can't remember who the entity is right now. So we may see more of that. And as more private and semi-private entities make such steps for reparations, it will put more pressure on governments, okay? But getting the states and and even when the legal arguments to justify reparations are there. So what the states, the Europeans and the United States may fall back on would be try to use economic arguments. Right now, Britain post-Brexit is going through some very serious times. They may try to use the excuse that they cannot afford it, okay? So we need to watch out for those arguments, although I will argue that they can, because when slavery ended, under the Emancipation Act, the planters were given with a total of 20 million pounds in reparations, and the figure was so large that the British government had to take a loan to pay off that. That loan is not paid up until I think it was 2005. So what I tell my students, because many people, myself included, have family who live and worked in the UK. If you have a family member who lived and worked in the UK up until 2005, their tax money was going towards paying a loan the British government took to pay reparations to former slave owners. So black and white Britons were paying that. And Britain never missed a payment on that loan, okay? So from 1830 up until the early 2000s. So consider that, right? How many ups and downs the British economy went through during that period. 2 world wars, the Great Depression of the 1920s, major recession, 1970s and 80s, etc. So Britain went through so much economic turmoil, and they have to pay reparations to the farm enslavers. So the economic argument cannot be used to not pay us reparations. So looking to the future, we need to keep battling towards reparations. I cannot say whether I would love to see it happen. I cannot say whether it will, but it is a battle that we need to keep pursuing. Within the region, I think the floodgates are now being open, and attitudes are changing with the younger generation. The feedback I get from many of my students, many of them feel that we should be a republic. Okay. A few years ago, many people were not in favor of that, but so I feel that with Barbados having made that move a couple of years ago, Jamaica, Antigua, and St. Kitts speaking about doing it, their leaders speaking about doing it, you're going to see more Caribbean countries possibly making that move, okay, towards becoming. And the passing of Her Majesty and the ascension to the throne of King Charles is going to speed up that, okay? Because it's a different era now, and he may not have the appeal that his deceased mother had. So a new general, and I also feel that the very public rift between Meghan and Harry and the royal family may play into that as well. So a lot of the links that people may have felt with the British monarchy, that would have been, there are two sides to every story, okay? We don't know what happened behind closed door. I'm not saying everything that Harry and Meghan said is true, but the fact of the matter is the optics of it. This was a lost opportunity, I feel, for the British royal family, because, for example, there are many people, and I've thought, so several of my college students have asked me this in terms of what purpose does the Commonwealth serve, okay? Now, the British monarchy and the British government by extension, at a time when Britain, in terms of military power, is declining. Just last week, a US general expressed concern that Britain has slipped from being a first-tier military power to a second-tier military power. So Britain has a decline in military power. An heir to the throne, marrying a woman of mixed race, that could have been great marketing for the Commonwealth. Okay. A recent survey showed that the Commonwealth, the population of the Commonwealth is a fairly young population. Bear in mind that the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, those 4 countries with majority white populations, they make up a minority of the Commonwealth population. The overwhelming majority of the Commonwealth population is Africa, the Caribbean, Asia, and some Middle Eastern countries. So you're talking about a majority non-white population, and if we put Africa into the mix, a mostly black population. Well, if we put Africa and India together, a mostly black and brown population. Okay, so the royal family had an opportunity to put a new face onto the Commonwealth. So this rift between them and Meghan and Harry, I think going forward is not going to really help convince many countries to stay to keep the monarch as their head of state. Some countries will replace the monarch, become a republic, and still stay within the Commonwealth. But even so, that tie it has been weakened. So going forward, I think that that move toward the colonization is going to continue.
And I believe that tie started to weaken from the day that Harry brought Meghan in the picture. Yeah, I thought it slowly behind the scenes, underneath.
Yes,
it started from then.
And yeah, things are bubbling to the surface now. And like I said, there are two sides to every story. But there was a recent incident that I think gave credence, even if everything Harry and Meghan said is not true. There was a recent incident that gives credence to some of what they said. That incident at a formal event at one of the, I can't remember if it was Buckingham Palace, one of the royal residences, where this Black British woman who heads a major charity and a senior member of the royal household, I think it was Prince William's godmother, was touching her here and asking her where she's from. And the lady said, well, I'm born in England, and where are you really from? Etc.
Interesting. Now, the conversation seemed like it's just getting started. And I know Gail, he could stay here and talk for hours. I remember our session. So I was a computer teacher at Charleston Secondary School,
Yeah,
and
we both started CSS together.
yes, and
And
so
often I would be in the computer lab doing work, etc.
yes, or just hiding away because
Yeah,
the staff room is quite noisy.
noisy. So just a quiet space. They very often either come by you in the
Yes,
computer lab or go by Mr. Vogo in the technical drawing room.
yes, yes. And we would often have conversations, and
Yes.
when Gil start on something, he could go on. That's one of the things I appreciate
That's
about
my
you.
flaw. That's my fault.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I appreciate about you, in that when you believe something, you're passionate about it, you hold it, you are firm. Like, this is what I believe, this is who I am, and I appreciate that about you. We need more persons like you, not the indecisive, like, don't know if they're going or if they're coming. Those are qualities indeed of a true leader. Now, as we wrap it up, as we bring the curtains down, I have one pop question that I want to ask you.
Sure. Hope I can
If
answer it. Go
there,
ahead.
yes, if there is, and you have 1 minute to answer, to like
Sure.
compress it.
I shall do my best.
Okay, all right, gotcha. If there is one world leader that
Mhm.
you could be given the opportunity to come in partnership with and work with doing this thing, the one thing is bringing awareness to us as a Black people, our culture, bringing awareness to our culture from the point of view that we are going to use it to work for us and not against us. We're going to use it as a catalyst, as
Mhm.
fuel in our tanks to push us forward and to make a in marked improvement, marked impressions, marks within this world. So leaving our mark as a Black people. If there's one world leader that you could be given that opportunity to work with, to partner with, bring awareness that we're going to use our history to work for us and not against us, who would that world leader be and why?
I'm going to give you a bonus. I'm going to give you two in 1 minute. Former U.S. President Barack Obama and the current Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Amor Motley.
Okay,
Okay.
interesting. And why?
Barack Obama, the 44th and the first President of the United States. He showed us what is possible. Okay. In the case of the United States, people who was freed from slavery barely over a century ago. And one of them was to become the most powerful man in the world. And he led by example, okay? Not a lot of bluster, like, Mr. Trump, etc. He led by example, okay? And he can show us what is possible, okay? Mia Motley is, since she became Prime Minister of Barbados, she has used every opportunity at regional and international UN meetings to highlight the issues that affect us in the Caribbean and also that affect the rest of the developing world, specifically small island developing states, or SIDS. Okay, she's extremely eloquent. She's right now my favorite regional prime minister. Okay, and the way and what I find with her, right? One issue I've had in the past is that I felt many of our regional leaders did not have the courage when they go to certain international forum to address certain issues the way they should. She has been very outspoken in speaking on issues, whether it's the impact of climate change caused by the actions of the developed world upon SIDS. She has spoken about the inequities and hypocrisies in many of the policies of the developed world, okay? So, yes, Barack
Awesome.
Obama and Mia Motley, two, who I would love to
Awesome.
work if I'm ever
Awesome.
so honored.
Awesome. And with that, we bring our window of our interview today on the Win Win Life talk show and podcast. If you would have hadn't gotten any sort of value, insight to what the wealth of knowledge that Dr. Gill would have shared with us today, please go ahead and hit that like button, that follow button. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button and share. Share this interview today with your family, with your friends on your timeline. Until we meet again next week, same time, same place. Have a wonderful rest of the Sunday afternoon. Au revoir. Thank you
Before we
again.
go, before we go, one last time, congratulations on your book.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
You too.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.